This is Garrison from those Diner and Motorcycle Guys. Gary Koz Mraz is an author and freelance moto-journalist for motorcycle travel magazines, including American Iron, Baggers, American Trike, Cruiser, and Quick Throttle. He is also the editor for BikerNet Trikes. A college professor and award-winning composer, Gary has traveled the world on two wheels, from China's Great Wall to the Himalayan mountains, Europe, or the back roads of America. His travel adventures feature interesting people and unique destinations in entertaining prose. And from my point of view, I'm jealous because he's got the greatest job in the world. He gets to test motorcycles, and they pay him to do it. So I'm in envy of Gary, and I want to welcome him to those Diner and Motorcycle Guys. Great to have you on the show, Gary.
You too, Garrison. You know what? You're not the only one that's jealous. Everybody hates me.
I could see where that would happen.
I roll into dealerships and I go into places, and because we work in motorcycle dealerships and in motorcycle related industries because we love motorcycles, but they always say, but we can't ride them because we're working around them. So it's a double-edged sword. At
age 12, that was actually the turning point. There's a quote that I found that you said, "I began riding at the age of 12. Revved the motor, popped the clutch, and the bike flew out from under me. It crashed in the bushes, and I was just left standing there, frozen as my friends laughed wildly. I had two choices, either get back on that crazy thing again or walk away, and you've been riding ever since."
Yeah, I was crazy enough to get back on that little Yamaha 125 up in the mountains.
Thank God you did, because you get to share with all of us some terrific articles, and you're an icon in the industry.
Yeah, most of my riding is street and cruiser, although I was invited in early 2011 to Motorcycle China. And that was an experience, let me tell you. There were 17 journalists invited to attend the third annual Harley Owners Group rally, Hog Rally in China, in Qingdao. And I was the only one that rode a motorcycle. All the other 16 journalists around the world knew that it wasn't safe, so they took cars. It was crazy over there, but you know what? It was fantastic. I rode 1,700 miles with the Shanghai Hogs, and man, it's a two-part story actually on Baggers Magazine. If you go to baggersmag.com and in their search engine just type in China, you'll see both my stories.
I want to comment on motorcycling in China. Now, I have not done it in China, but I've done it in India and I've done it in Egypt. And one thing I know is that you sort of take your life in your hands. In fact, in that two-part article you were talking about, there's a place where you mentioned that we Americans are used to having the right of way, and in China it's called first right.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And whoever's first is right. So in other words, everyone is moving forward as fast as they can to be first. So 1 inch ahead of the guy next to you gives you the right of way. Shanghai has no red lights. What I mean is they have stoplights, but no one pays attention. So you really have to be really incredibly aggressive. I fortunately rode with a couple dozen, like I say, Shanghai Hog members, Chinese, and I just followed them. I just held onto my hat and just followed them. And it was something. I mean, freeways just end. Roads just turn to dirt, and you have to go. You're literally on dirt roads. I mean, it's full on chaos. And of course, the types of vehicles they have there, they have these rototillers that they've turned into road vehicles. I mean, it's just madness. But, that made a great story.
The two-part series is absolutely phenomenal. It's Zen and the Art of Motorcycling China, 6 days, 1,600 miles on Harley Davidsons. And your style of riding is so terrific. And a couple of things really popped out for me, one of which was the statistic. China has 100 million active motorcyclists. It's almost a third of the U.S. population.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, remember, these are all 250cc and under, and these are almost level scooters, and because of that, remember that they do not allow any two-wheel vehicles on the Chinese freeways. So we were relegated to side roads. We never could get on any of the freeways. So it was always chaos everywhere we were, because they just figured, look, whether it's a Harley or a little scooter, for them it's all the same thing. They have a lot of challenges to go through over there to really embrace cruising motorcyclists that we're used to here in the States. But Harley's doing a good job with it over there. They actually have, I believe, about 7 Harley dealerships now in China.
What was it like in terms of if you were to say a Harley group, a Harley owners group, or a hog group has a personality to it? Did you find a lot of cultural differences between the riders there as part of the hog groups versus here?
Well, it was actually someone I was with summed it up very. He was Chinese. He was American Chinese, lived in Chinese, but he summed it up really clearly. As I was riding with this group, and we'd stop at restaurants and such and sit down, and he'd say, "I want you to look at the guys around you." And all around me, the riders I was with, they're slapping each other's back, they're talking about stuff, they're hitting each other on the shoulder, talking about the ride, and every other Chinese in the room was very quiet, very restrained. He said, "Look at the difference here. Look at how they communicate to each other." And I thought, wow, that's true. These guys have found sort of a freedom that we've embraced, and that's what they want, and they're doing it. And it's really commendable.
What is the scrap law?
Every 11 years, you need to scrap, trash, get rid of your two-wheeled vehicle. So what's happened is that all those two-stroke smog-creating scooters of the past several decades have all been trashed, and when I was in the major metropolis of Shanghai, they're almost all electric scooters. So they've really, in that regard, advanced ahead of us as far as the technology goes, because they're scrapping again every 11 years the two-wheeled scooters.
You mentioned about how some gas stations still adhere to the belief that it's safer to pour gas into a motorcycle with a pot.
It comes from something regarding the actual nozzle of the gas delivery touching the gas tank of the motorcycle and some spark or something. It's only in one of the provinces that really adheres to that, but we had to do it. I got photos in there of us, and imagine 20 guys rolling into a gas station having to fill up with, little coffee pots.
This must have been a phenomenal trip for you.
It was actually life-changing. I mean, I really saw the world in a very different way. I mean, actually, I'd been to China. I was the first Americans invited into China in 1990, and 1989 was Tiananmen Square. And I spent almost a month in China at that time, and I walked into a very, very different world, 25, 30 years later. And it's really an amazing, eye-opening experience, really. And like I say, it's life-changing. It changes the way I see the world.
I encourage all those diner and motorcycle guys, listeners, to read Gary's article. We have direct links to it on our website. It's such a fast read, but you will be so engaged because not only is Gary's writing style phenomenal, but the whole experience is so well captured. You are a prolific writer, Gary, and I want to talk about another side of your writing. You recently came out with a book called Midnight Rider on a Graveyard Run, Tales of the Midnight Writer. And the book takes readers into what I consider a dark side of riding motorcycles, into the facts behind highway murders, and into a very sort of Twilight Zone experience. In fact, the book's a maelstrom of nonstop drama. And I wonder if you'd talk about the book and what was the motivation to write it for you?
How it all started was I was doing another story, which I followed the Easy Rider route from Los Angeles to New Orleans. And so I did this in 2011, late 2011, and that story is actually called Easy Writer, W-R-I-T-E-R. It's on Baggers also, so if you go to Baggers and just Google search Easy Writer, you'll see that story. And so what that was obviously, it was about a 7-day one-way route, on the route, and I was traveling along Highway 40, which is a large part of the route for the story in the movie, Easy Rider, Dennis Hopper and Peter Fonda. We were doing a lot of night riding, and we were doing a lot of long stretches. I learned about what was called the Corridor of Death. And it turns out that in 2009, there was this series of murders. Actually, about 500 women had been murdered during a certain year period, and their bodies were dumped in truck stops, hotels, by the side of the road. And the feds got involved, and they formed HISKI, which is the Highway Serial Killer Initiative. And you can Google search any of this stuff. Anyhow, I'd heard about this by truckers and by other people on the route, and so I said, what's going on here? So when I came back from the Easy Rider trip, I sat down, did a little homework, and I thought, I'm going to ride only at night. I'm going to ride across the country. I'm going to follow the rules and regs that the truckers have to follow. I'm going to, only ride 11 hours a day because they can only ride 60 hours in a 7-day week. And they need to have a 34-hour reset. So anyhow, I was going to follow their rules and regs. So I wrapped my head around it. I did some research, and I did that. I just said, okay, I'm going to, I got a CB on my bike. I mean, you got to imagine because, my world out there is I'm rolling with truckers at night. I went to truck stops. I gassed up in truck stops. I ate in truck stops. Part of the story was, I thought, okay, I want to understand this graveyard culture, this sort of subculture at night. I mean, there's 3.5 million truckers and there's 8 million graveyard shift workers, What's going on here, So I embedded myself into that. That's how it all started, with the driving force of saying, okay, let me see if I can learn more about this corridor of death, something I'd never, ever heard about.
It's one of those books that you can't put down. It really exposes a dark world and how frightening it truly is. I mean, we're talking about kidnappings and death merchants and conspiracy and you name it.
Well, it's an unsolved mystery, really. I mean, I didn't really get, this isn't what I was in for. I mean, I was in for sort of it was like an expose. I thought I'd learn something, but the longer I rode, the deeper I got and the darker it got. And like I said, I'd never heard about this. And I'd roll into a truck stop at, 5 in the morning, 4 in the morning. I'm really suspicious. In other words, I'm not a trucker. And no one really wants to talk to me. They don't, what is this guy doing here? I got to speak with people. It took a while to get to know people. In fact, the best communication, the best interviews and information I got was from truckers on the road on the ZB. So I rolled into one of the truck stops in Texas, and I met this truck stop preacher. And he had a trailer outside the truck stop, and what he would do is he'd walk through and he'd bless the trucks. And truckers they're not going to Sunday Mass because they're on the road. They're missing this whole, it's a different life altogether. So I sat down with him and we talked about it, and he said, I asked him, I said, have you ever heard about the corridor of death? And he said, no, I never have. He goes, but I do. What I hear about all the time from the truckers is the missings. And I said, the missings? He goes, yeah. And he goes, people missing. So that opened up a whole nother door. Let me ask you, Garrison, I mean, how many people do you think were reported missing last year in the United States of America? Give me a guess.
In the whole country?
Yeah, in U.S., United States of America.
5,000?
800,000 people were reported missing last year. Now, I know this. Your mind is like reeling right now, and you can Google search this right now. And those are the reported missings. Because remember, the 500 women I'm talking about that were murdered were what truckers call lot lizards. They're truck stop prostitutes. And so when I started having this discussion with the lot lizards and the prostitutes, they said, yeah, oh no, we know what's going on. Plus, imagine all the ones that are not reported missing, like us. Even if half of those people are found, you're still talking 500,000 people a year are reported missing in the United States. What happened was, all of a sudden, my dialogue and my conversations with these lot lizards or prostitutes now turned into a whole nother story, which escalates and gets deeper as far as now talking about the conspiracy part. When I tell the story, I can tell you what happened to me because it happened to me. So, as I write as I write my story, and I start meeting these people, my story kind of turns into their story because now all of a sudden they're telling me what they know about. And I had to change the name. Actually, it was Lizette, one of the prostitutes I met in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. She's the one that really gave me a lot of information on this backstory. And the book turns into kind of her story at a certain point.
So you're writing at night. You're writing early in the morning. You're on the roads that make up the corridor of death. And now you're actually talking to people you meet to get information for the book and to find out exactly what's going on. Were there points where you stepped back and said, I'm getting a little concerned now. Are these folks wondering why I'm asking these questions, and are they going to come after me?
I actually took the 10 on the original route. Was to take the 10. I was going to go to Florida, and I didn't make it within the time frame, so I stopped in Louisiana, and I came back up the 40 on the way back. So it was a 10 one way and the 40 back. And when I met Lizette in Oklahoma, I stopped my story because what I was hearing was so overwhelming that she became part of the storyline. And I kept telling my girlfriend, because she obviously knew what was going on. I'm writing. Actually, this was a blog. This started out as a blog on BikerNet, and BikerNet is owned by Keith Ball, and you probably know Keith from Easy Rider. He was he started Easy Rider magazine, 35, 40 years ago. So it was started as a blog. So people were following me on this blog, and my girlfriend calls me, she goes, Koz, you got to stop. She said, I'm worried about that. And a lot of readers and a lot of people were following it. And ultimately, when it was said and done, the readers said, we want this in one solid condensed story, hence the book. The book's actually a pretty short book. It's only 75 pages. Actually, it's part of a trilogy. So it really turned into something really, really different. It just evolved as I went because everything was changing. Every day was another day. Every day was something else was happening.
This can make for a great reality show.
Well, I'll tell you, I call it faction. I can only tell you the stuff that I was there for, because obviously, I don't know, and I can, we can do the research on the Hiskey and on the government, the government task force and the corridor of death and the missings, all that stuff is real. It's like, where does real and fiction come together, in this crazy storyline of what's going on in these conspiracies. To this day, my girlfriend does say, you better be careful.
You always invite the reader in for an experience beyond the normal motorcycle writing. You always give them an out-of-frame of reference experience, and I think that's part of the beauty of your writing. And Midnight Rider on a Graveyard Run and Zen and the Art of Motorcycling China are two different aspects of your writing, but both are captivating, each in its own way.
Well, I appreciate that, and that's true. I mean, if you go back through the history of my stories, I remember one of my first stories was called "Wish You Were Here," trip to Mono Lake, and if you're a Pink Floyd fan, you would know that the shot on the postcard that came in the Pink Floyd album "Wish You Were Here" was taken at Mono Lake. These things in our lives, they have impact, they have imprints, they have memories, they change us, and those things, it's all the story. It's all part of the story. It's not just a travel thing. There's so many layers of what's happening in everything that we do, and if you can dig deep enough, you find a really compelling story.
And on behalf of all readers, thank you for bringing an aspect of adventure through the printed word to all of us. You are priceless as one of the motorcycle industry's coveted writers, and we all are looking forward to the next article or book that you come out with. And I wonder if you would share with those Diner and Motorcycle Guys listeners where they can follow you and where they can purchase the book.
The book's available on Amazon, so just go to Amazon, type in Midnight Rider on a Graveyard Run, and I'll show up as there's the printed book, there's a Kindle edition, so you can download a digital version. I launched it only a couple of weeks ago, and so this is all fresh stuff, and I'm doing book readings. I'm doing something actually this evening somewhere, so I'm really want to, really engage, get involved in this in multiple ways. Plus, I'm actually, Garrison, I'm going to do a audiobook, and I know a lot of people who actually like to listen to books in their cars or on their motorcycle. I have jet pilot friends that listen to audiobooks all the time. So I'm doing an audiobook. So I'm going to try to wrap around a lot of different, ways to spread the word. As you mentioned, I am the editor of BikerNet Trikes. If you go to bikernet.com, you'll see that there's BikerNet, BikerNet Baggers, BikerNet Trikes, and actually Genevieve Schmidt's Women's Rider Now site is up there too, and what we call the family of sites. Pretty awesome, and I really suggest anybody just go to BikerNet, and you're going to find something for 2 wheels, 3 wheels, custom. It's really an awesome site, and so go there, and you can email me via BikerNet Trikes. Easy to get through there. In fact, I'm probably just Google search my name. I'm probably really easy to find anywhere. I've written so many articles. I'm easy to find.
Gary, it has been such a pleasure having you on those Diner and Motorcycle Guys.
Thanks so much. And I always tell people, we're the ride is the reward, and we as riders, we don't watch the passing parade. We are the passing parade, and we actually get to ride off into the sunset.
On that note, again, Gary, thank you. We look forward to your further adventures.
Thank you very much.